Hey guys, welcome to Module 2. So just to recap what we did last week in your discussion board assignment. Last week we had you looking at the three components or branches of the criminal justice system, and you guys did a great job on that assignment. So we know those three components or branches are law enforcement, courts, and corrections. Also last week you evaluated the primary responsibilities of each of those branches. You examined how they might complement each other, and then you also researched and reported on what might happen if one of those branches were to somehow malfunction. And so typically what we're looking for there is, as I offered you an example, let's say that there's excessive overcrowding in an institution, a prison. That's obviously going to impact the number of programs that they can offer inmates. And oftentimes programs are essential for rehabilitation. So if inmates aren't properly rehabilitated, then they are released back in the community with little or no skills needed to correct their criminal behavior and become good law-abiding citizens. And that obviously can impact law enforcement again, because they're going to be going out investigating crimes that these guys may have committed, and then they're back in court again. So the cycle sort of repeats itself. So that's just a little example as to how the malfunction of one branch might impact the other two. All right, and that was the important part of that discussion, was to identify how might that malfunctioning branch impact the other two. So again, we're looking at this whole idea of the criminal justice system and whether or not they act as a well-oiled machine, or are they not in tune with each other. And so forth. Okay, so overall, you guys did a good job. So this week, a couple things we're doing is a discussion board, and then we're also doing our first Milestone One assignment. So the focus of this short lecture is to review some concepts that will help you with your discussion board assignment this week, and then I'm going to go over some of the key things associated with the Milestone One assignment. Okay, so first let's talk a little bit about the discussion board assignment this week. This week the discussion board assignment has you taking a look at a very interesting case, and this is a case involving the state of Maryland and a law that they passed which allowed jails to collect DNA swab from people who were arrested for certain offenses, usually violent felonies, things like that. So the question became for the Supreme Court was whether or not this was a search. And obviously, if it is a search, then the search requires probable cause based on the Fourth Amendment. And this case ties nicely into two concepts that I'm going to go over here in just a minute that you read about. And that is a crime control model and due process model in terms of how the criminal justice system might operate. Okay, so a couple things you have to do, obviously, is you have to read that case. In this short lecture, I'll also give you a different link that you can take a look at that might help you, might be a little bit easier in terms of evaluating that case. I'll show you that towards the end. I'll give you that link. But that's going to be our discussion board assignment for the week. So let me just go here and talk briefly about the Fourth Amendment, and I'm going to go ahead and disappear here. So the Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures, and the courts are the ones that define whether a search is reasonable or unreasonable, right? But the Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures. It does not give individuals an absolute right to privacy under all conditions and circumstances, because there are exceptions. And it does not prohibit all searches and seizures. So, for example, if I were to be driving down the street and I thought a cop was going to stop me and I threw something out the window, contraband, and the police officer were to go pick that up, that's not a search because I discarded it. There's no expectation of privacy there. All right? So that's the Fourth Amendment. So make sure as you're reading through this chapter, you take a few minutes and carefully understand what the Fourth Amendment is and what it is not. It prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures. And it's always good to make sure that you read the whole Fourth Amendment. what was it that the founding fathers were seeking to protect? Okay. So in discussing search and seizure, and specifically as we're talking about this week's discussion board assignment, in your comment threads, you're going to be looking at this whole idea of due process and crime control. In other words, when you state your opinion, you're going to need to do some follow-up and determine whether or not you think that you or your classmates are more of the individual rights due process school or more of the public order crime control school. And so I want to spend just a few minutes going over what these two concepts are so you have an idea as you begin to prepare for your discussion board assignment. So basically we're looking at individual rights versus public order. All right, so we're looking at the due process versus crime control model. So individual rights or the due process model basically states that rights advocates seek to protect personal freedoms within the process of the criminal justice system. And so I have listed here a Warren Court. Now Earl Warren was the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court from 1953 to 1969. And so that's often referred to as a Warren Court. And Chief Justice Earl Warren did a lot in order to promote individual rights. So during his time on the bench and his overseeing the Supreme Court, we had a lot of issues pop up like Miranda. In other words, the court believed that defendants should have a right to have an attorney present, should understand the consequences of giving statements to the police. So they gave us those type of rights. Next, we would have public order or crime control model. And they believe in the prevention of future crimes and the reduction of harm caused by criminal activity. And a good example of this was the Rehnquist Court of the United States Supreme Court, and he was Chief Justice from 1986 to 2005. Now, what Rehnquist did was they gave us maybe exceptions to Miranda. Okay, so maybe there was a public safety exception. So let's say that police were chasing me and I had a gun and I ran into a grocery store and I hid the gun in the grocery store. When the police found me, I didn't have the gun, but I had bullets in a holster. If the cop were to say, "What did you do with the gun?" because there's kids that are in the store or somebody might find it and get hurt, and I were to say, "Well, it's over by the cereal aisle," that would be okay now under the law, and that was because of Rehnquist, and they began to make some exceptions to certain doctrines such as Miranda. So that's the crime control model. In other words, the primary focus is to control crime, reduce the harm caused by crime, and so we're going to provide some latitude for those in public safety, law enforcement, as they go about doing some of their jobs. Okay, so in our textbook, make sure you take a look at and understand the due process model and the crime control model, because it's going to tie into this case that you're going to be reading about as to whether or not you think it's good public policy for jails to be able to take DNA swabs from people who've just been arrested for a crime. They haven't been charged with a crime, they haven't been convicted of a crime. They've only been charged with certain types of crimes. And whether or not you think that might be an infringement on somebody's Fourth Amendment rights to be free from unreasonable government searches and seizures. All right, so you can take a look at that case. I think you'll find it interesting. And then you're going to need to tie the concepts of due process and crime control model into your responses or maybe into your comment to your classmates. All right, so make sure you take a look at that in your textbook. And then obviously if you have any questions, you can kindly let me know. Now, individual rights and public order, these two perspectives are also divided by two models of the criminal justice system, so we already talked about that. Each of these models lends important insight into the philosophies on which American criminal justice system is based. And so, again, the case is Maryland versus King, and it's a DNA during booking process. So that's the case you're going to be looking at. Again, when you look at the criminal justice system, and you can see that in, most notably in the Supreme Court, as presidents have an opportunity to select members for the Supreme Court, and typically conservative presidents or Republicans tend to appoint conservative jurists, and conservative jurists tend to be more public order oriented, whereas those judges who are appointed by Democrats in the president's as a president tend to pick those who believe in individual rights, and so those individual rights translate into a way of making sure that each step along the way, inmates' rights are clearly protected, or defendants' rights are clearly protected. So those are the two types of judicial thoughts that we have going on in our country. All right. So again, take a look at Maryland versus King. There's a link in the website or in the module this week, so you need to take a look at that. So before I start talking about legal searches based on jobs, which is going to be part of our Milestone One assignment this week, let me just call up the grading rubric. So it's incumbent upon you to make sure you carefully review the grading rubric associated with your first Milestone One assignment. All right, and that's attached in the module file. So you're going to have to go in and take a look at that. Read it carefully, understand what's expected of you, understand what each of the critical elements requires you to do, and make sure you answer each of those specific questions related to that critical element. So this week, for example, you're looking at communication and collaboration, and that's going to be a common theme for us, because in order for the criminal justice system to properly operate and to be efficient and effective, there needs to be communication and collaboration between each of the branches. And so that's what you're going to be looking at this week primarily. All right. So, the first thing you're going to be looking at, for example, if I were to go over here, is the idea of a legal search. And you're going to give me some idea as to the legal requirements for a police officer to do a search versus maybe a correctional officer to do a search. You're going to be looking at who a police officer might need to get a hold of in order to obtain information about an inmate, maybe to facilitate a criminal investigation. Again, it's systems working together. Here we have law enforcement working with corrections to get certain type of information that might help facilitate a criminal investigation that the officer's working on. The next example is someone that's been charged with a crime and ultimately has been convicted, and now we need to do a pre-sentence investigation report. And who does that? And then again, it's collaboration. It's a group working with the court to provide the court, being the judge, with sufficient information so the judge can make a proper sentence of the individual. In other words, how much time should this person do in prison, if any, an array of things that need to take place. So again, more people working together for the common cause of the criminal justice system. And then finally, you're going to be looking at a couple cases that you're going to have to research, and the links are available, as you can see here, and discuss them in the context of communication and collaboration and the impact that these cases might have on a particular criminal justice practitioner. I'll give you a link at the end of this short module lecture that should help you in terms of identifying cases, and then you can listen to the audio version. So for those of you who may be doing your lunch breaks or something, you can listen to the audio arguments from the court, and then there is ultimately their decision, which is also can be obtained in audio format. So I'll give you both of those. Okay. The key thing about this assignment is that you have a couple options. Number one is you can present it in the form of a PowerPoint, much like I'm going to present for you today, and it has to be submitted as 2 to 3 slides, or you can submit it as a Word document, which would be about 1 to 2 pages. So as part of this lecture, I'm going to show you how and what you might want to do if you like to do a PowerPoint presentation, just so you know what the expectations are. Okay, so take a look at the grading rubric. It's right here. This tells you what we're looking for in terms of this assignment. So read it carefully, make sure you meet those expectations, and then I will obviously provide you feedback as we move along. Okay, so that's going to be the end of part 1. Part 2 of my short module lecture, I'm going to go ahead and discuss what I'm looking for in our Milestone One, dealing with communications and collaboration. So I'll see you in a second. Thanks, bye.